Victor Gao, why is Xi Jinping so friendly with Kim Jong-un of North Korea and Vladimir Putin of Russia? I mean, if he is this great, amazing world leader, as Trump has described him, surely he should be keeping a different kind of company. Victor Gao, you've been quite rude about America and its intentions in the trade war, but Donald Trump has been nothing but polite about your leader, Xi Jinping. He called him a strong leader, a great leader. Why doesn't Xi Jinping return the compliment? Why don't you return the compliment?
I always have the highest respect for the American people and for the ingenuity and the creativity of the United States as a nation. Now, sometimes I'm critical of President Trump and his trade policies. That doesn't mean that Victor Gao has any lack of respect for the American people. Now, for President Trump, while I applaud the fact that he used the nice words, pleasant words about China for President Xi Jinping, we always need to watch whatever he walks, and we cannot purely depend on whatever he talks. Therefore, this is the time to see whether he talks the talk and walks the walk. And this will be the litmus test. I think, and my concern is that the greatest predictability in the world of today is the unpredictability of the United States. And the greatest certainty in the world of today is the uncertainty of the United States. And unfortunately, President Trump.
There are many things that Americans admire about China. I myself was traveling through China for quite a long time in 1981, when it was a very, very different country. Now, so I've seen the extraordinary transformation of China. It's mind-blowing, literally. It's extraordinary. I wonder what you, Victor Gao, admire about America.
Well, I have the highest admiration you can think about for the American people, for their creativity, resourcefulness, as well as for their great natural endowment and very unmatched geopolitical positions in the northern part of the United States. And I think whatever China is doing is trying its best to make the United States love peace more, rather than try to resort to war to solve any problem between with any other country. This is why China never looks down upon the United States, and China always wants to engage with the United States as an equal partner. And we truly believe that if China and the United States can set their sights on the same major issue in the world, there will be nothing in this world which cannot be resolved for our mutual benefit, as well as for the benefit of mankind as a whole.
Zhu Jie, I mean, Victor Gao loves to talk about, China and peace and how it's a peace-loving country that wants to spread peace around the world. But when you look at China's military buildup, which is also extraordinary, especially its naval buildup in the region, what story does that tell you?
Well, there's plenty of stories in here. I think for the first layer is really that sense of China's obsession regarding neighboring countries, because this is the country share a border with 14 different countries, and obviously having secure border and to be paired with the modern army, and I think that's absolutely necessary. Now, secondly, I think also given Chinese foreign policy's obsession towards sovereignty and territorial integrity, so when it comes to issues related to Taiwan, and when it comes to issues related to South China Sea, of course, and China will show a very assertive stance on that. So I think it's just the way how the Chinese foreign policy and also the military conduct is operate as it is today. And of course, I think for many, and particularly among the G7 countries, when I look at this, and they would consider this probably bring more fear than admiration regarding China's military capability.
What do you think China wants to do with its military capability? What's the end goal here? Zhu Jie.
Well, the end goal is really about deterrence, to win a war without fighting. I mean, if we come back to a month ago, was that gigantic military parade to be put forward at Tiananmen Square. And one thing has been quite clear is that the message has been clear there, and that China does have the capability when it comes to the military competition with the United States or with the others. However, whether China decided to use it, that's an entirely different matter.
Victor Gao, is that this parade of military hardware that we saw in Beijing, is the language that comes out of your leader, Xi Jinping, is that about respect? Is it about fear? Is it about domination in the region? What's it about?
Well, the victory parade on September the 3rd has only one purpose. That is to defend China's sovereignty and national territorial integrity, and to make the United States and the American people love peace more than what they used to. And this is the only purpose. China's national defense is not a measure up against any of our neighboring countries. It is a measuring up against only one country, that is the United States. And the only purpose of measuring up against the United States is to make sure that the United States will love peace and will no longer be happy to move to the gun and shoot from the hip, especially not vis-a-vis China. That's the only purpose.
But hang on a minute, Victor. It is Chinese components that allow the Russians to fire missiles and drones into Ukraine. China could stop the war in Ukraine today if Xi Jinping picked up the phone to Vladimir Putin and said, we can be the best of friends, but you cannot wage this war. He has refused to do that. He has met Vladimir Putin together with the North Korean leader at that parade on the 3rd of September. I mean, these are not exactly peace-loving signals, are they?
You are wrong, with due respect. If China supplies weapons to the Russian side, Russia would have won the war overnight. For example, China has this most lethal anti-drone weapon and system, which can shoot down any group of drones en masse. And this is exactly what the Russians would need, because drones launched and used by the Ukrainians have done havoc against Russia, not only inside the Ukraine, but deep inside Russia. This is ample proof to show that China does not supply weapons to either Russia or Ukraine. And if China supplies weapon to either side, that side receiving China weapon will win the war immediately.
Zhu Jie, is any of that right?
Well, I think regarding the Russia, Ukraine, and China, and that's an entire separate question. But what we can really judging from the meeting, what we had today, I think President Trump even mentioned that was much hoping that can work together with China to resolve this war in Ukraine related matters. So let's see whether the G2, the framework which we just had this morning, will be able to solve the Ukraine-Russia issue for now. But I think at the moment, we have seen a lot of words been floating around and very little deeds, that how much, firstly, Washington get involved, and secondly, how much Beijing would like to get involved on European security architecture.
But if China was not providing the kind of overtly non-military aid to Russia that it's been providing, for the last 2 years or 2.5 years of the war, do you think that Russia would not be able to conduct this war as it has done so far?
Well, I think weapon is one thing, but another element in here is this regular trade between China and Russia, and also the volumes of trade and that Beijing has purchased from Russia, that somehow give the bloodline to running the economy. So it's less about the weapon, but I think it's more about the trading relationship that Beijing has offered to Russia right now. That seems to putting under the scope being further examined.
Victor Gao, why is Xi Jinping so friendly with Kim Jong-un of North Korea and Vladimir Putin of Russia? I mean, if he is this great, amazing world leader, as Trump has described him, surely he should be keeping a different kind of company.
Well, for the record, China and DPRK have the only blood treaty between China and any other country. That means after the end of the Korean War, China and DPRK have signed a mutual defense treaty, whereby each side will need to come to the other side's defense if the other side is attacked. Now, this treaty is automatically renewable after 20 years, and it has never been terminated. That means between China and DPRK, we do have this time-honored mutual defense treaty. And China only has this defense treaty with DPRK, not with any other country. That means if any country wants to second-guess China's determination to come to DPRK's aid if DPRK is attacked militarily, then please read the national and the mutual defense treaty between China and DPRK. Now, between China and Russia, we engage in normal trade with each other. China will never allow any other country to disapprove or to disqualify China from engaging with any other country, including Russia, in normal trade relations, unless it is being blocked by the United Nations Security Council. That is the only litmus test. China does not allow any sanction imposed by any other country except the sanctions blessed by the United Nations Security Council.
I want to talk about nuclear weapons and nuclear testing a little bit, if I may. Donald Trump, actually to many people's surprise, also announced today on his way back to Washington that he wants to resume nuclear testing immediately after having not done so for 33 years. Now, what does Beijing make of that statement?
Well, Beijing's policy about nuclear weapons and use of nuclear weapons and non-use of nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon countries or nuclear weapon-free zones is well recorded. China will never use nuclear weapons against any other country ahead of time, and China will never allow any other country which uses nuclear weapon against China to survive China's nuclear retaliation. That means China has built up MAD capabilities to deter any country in the world which may be mad enough to strike China with nuclear weapons. China will never do this kind of thing against any other country, but China will never allow that nuclear power to strike China first to survive China's brutal, ruthless nuclear retaliation. I hope President Trump will get that message, and I hope the United States will never ponder the possibility of using nuclear weapon against China, because that will trigger immediate nuclear annihilation of the United States by the Chinese retaliation.
I mean, the Americans have not even dropped the slightest hint that they might want to target anyone with nuclear weapons, let alone China. So why are you so robust in your language?
No, it's not my language is robust. It is China's position is as robust as you can expect. China will not attack any country first with nuclear weapons, but China will never allow any nuclear power which strikes China first with nuclear weapon to survive China's nuclear retaliation, period. That's robustness you may be calling for.
And just briefly on this, do you think that China will now also resume testing of nuclear weapons?
China has never stopped nuclear testing. China's nuclear stockpile is a fraction of that of the United States or of Russia, but China's position is very clear. China will have enough nuclear warheads after the first nuclear strike by any nuclear power to make sure that that nuclear power which strikes China first will be annihilated by a nuclear weapon. That is Armageddon, period.
Well, beyond the mountain, I think, I'd just like to adding on this element in here. So while we're talking about DPRK, while we're talking about China, and we also talk about Russia and Moscow earlier, I think one of the biggest worry Beijing would have right now at this moment is that a close ties between the DPRK and Russia does not serve China's interests very well. Now, having both surrounded by nuclear neighbors, and China's policy obviously is do not rule out, firstly, by not using the nuclear. However, I think these things need to be said that what Russia and DPRK has been doing is not something at Beijing's best interest at the moment.
Okay, let's move on to, I want to get back to the trade relationship between America and China, which is, at the heart of the meeting that we had today. And I just wonder, Victor Gao, whether you think at the end of the day, America and China can find some kind of mutual understanding where they both, produce high-end goods when it comes to, artificial intelligence. They both produce electric vehicles. They help each other on things like climate change. Or do you think that the competition between these two great powers is so intense that actually whatever anyone says, we are slowly moving towards some kind of confrontation?
No, I don't think so. I think by the end of the day, I truly believe in the inevitability of peace between China and the United States. I'm a complete opposer to the so-called destined for war scenario between China and the United States. Allow me to use soybean as an example. China has the biggest demand for soybean. And if the United States wants to wage a tariff war against China, then China will not buy a single item of soybean to the great detriment of the soybean growers in the United States. That means the United States should give up any idea of weaponizing tariff against China, because otherwise China will retaliate. China will be ready to see complete winding down to zero of the two-way trading goods if the United States wants to weaponize tariff. That is the bottom line. China wants to engage with the United States. China wants to buy as much soybean as the American farmers can grow, and China is the only biggest market for soybean, amazingly.
Right.
Therefore, President Trump should really think about the well-being of the American farmers before he even thinks about the crazy idea of launching tariff war against China. We should go back to square one. That means China and the United States don't weaponize tariff against each other. That is the better way between China and the United States.
Right, but what about Chinese factories? You have a manufacturing bubble. You after your property bubble burst, you put all your assets and all your investment into manufacturing. You want to become, the world's, single most important manufacturing power, and you're brilliant at it. But you need to sell the stuff that you make, and you can't sell all of it to China or even to Southeast Asia or to Europe. You're going to have to sell a lot of it to America. So that is where the Americans have a stranglehold over you, don't they? Because if you don't sell the stuff, your factories go bust and your workers get very unhappy.
With due respect, I completely disagree with you, sir. Why? Because the United States has been calling for decoupling for at least 7 or 8 years. Do you think China will not prepare for that extreme situation? China's fully prepared if the United States really wants to decouple from China. Meaning there will be no more trade between China and the United States if that's what the United States wants to see. And China will be fully prepared. Do you know what we are talking about now? We are talking about landing persons on the moon ahead of any other country. We are talking about fusion technology to generate power without limit and bring the benefits to the 8 billion people in the world. We are talking about deep space, deep sea. We are talking about everything to be enabled by AI. We are not talking about producing toys or garments or textiles or shoes anymore. We are talking really about the cutting edge technology, the breakthrough that mankind can think about. That will be the stabilizing factor for the Chinese economic growth. I don't think there is any other country in the world which is so focused on what we call new qualitative productivity, which is a tongue twister, but which means you generate productivity through technological breakthroughs. That's what China is focused upon now.
All right,
Mark,
do you buy what Victor is selling?
Just for putting this, not the tongue twister, but the new terms on the economic terms that Beijing has defined, putting it aside, I think what we have seen so far, really, again, judging from the readouts we have from both ends today, is actually United States is promising to invest more in China. And that is actually not reducing the dependency, but actually increasing the dependency between China and the United States. And if we're talking about market behavior, and what the United States has been asking China to purchasing extra soybeans, that is actually a market distortion. That is not actually something that follow the market economy. So whether China is willing to do that, that is up to Beijing to decide on the one hand. Then I think on the other hand, Beijing has already learned from the sense of unpredictability and also the economic behavior that's set up by the Trump administration. So what Beijing has decided is not to putting all the eggs in one basket. I think equally United States is playing on a similar strategy in here to not overly dependent on China. And likewise, I think European Union does the same thing. So I think what we have right now is every single country, major economies in the world, they all become so inward looking. And it has led into the situation where we are today. So it's less of the dependency, but it's more about setting the fortress and how can I protect oneself.
Okay. Just finally, I want to spend a minute or two talking about Taiwan. First, you, Jujie. Taiwan, as far as I can gather, didn't come up at all in the meeting. And certainly there was nothing in the official readout about Taiwan. Does that surprise you?
No, it's not surprising me at all. I think really judging from the results and also judging from the mood with the United States, that obviously Taiwan is a major, major issue. between the two. And then that's probably the fundamental agreement between the Beijing and the United States back to 1979 when they formally established the diplomatic relations. So I think any major changes regarding Taiwan, firstly, that would require to have some at least foundational level of trust between Beijing and Washington. At the moment, I do not see that trust actually exist. And secondly, there are China hawks around the Trump administration and who deliberately looking for changes in status towards Taiwan. So I think really for Donald Trump himself, and he's not really willing to making a very bold move for that.
Victor Gao, final question to you. Do you think if your government were to encroach on Taiwan militarily, either through a naval blockade or an invasion, and we know that Xi Jinping is on the record for saying that he wants Taiwan to be reunified, as he put it, with the motherland at some stage before he leaves office, do you think that President Trump, should he be in the White House at the time, will sit by and do nothing, or will he intervene and use American power to stop you?
First of all, let's be honest. The real status of the relations across the two sides of the Taiwan Strait is the unfinished civil war back in 1949. So if China really moves to achieve unification or liberation of Taiwan, it is the resurrection of the unfinished civil war. Do you really think the United States or President Trump or anyone else in the White House want to be involved in a civil war between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait? That's number one. I'm completely ruling that option out on the table. Secondly, the status of Taiwan being part of China is carved in stone in the Cairo Declaration and the Potsdam Proclamation. No one can change that. Whether you want to try that or not, that's another matter. But you can never change the final verdict of history in the Cairo Declaration and the Potsdam Proclamation. Meaning China is completely on the right side of history. If we want to have another civil war to finish the unfinished civil war back in 1949, that's China's internal matter. Taiwan will be liberated by peaceful means, preferably, or by a resurrected civil war, if it is necessary. We want
but they don't want to be liberated.
Continue.
Victor Gao, they don't want to be liberated. They quite like living in their own country. The majority of Taiwanese do not want to be part of the People's Republic of China.
Well, the people in the Confederation did not want to join the Union, but President Lincoln decided otherwise. President Lincoln decided to bring them back to the Union with force if it is necessary. And this is exactly what the Union did against the Confederation. And that is the only logical conclusion for the relations between the Federation on the one side and the Confederation on the other side. The Confederation was defeated, and now they are very much part of the Union. And the United States, after the Civil War, has been one nation under God, indivisible. That is the truth for the United States. It will be the truth for China too. One day when China is reunited, you will see China will never be divisible, and no one can ever dare to split any part of China away from China.
What we just watched was an interview segment from Channel 4, UK, Britain's national television network, on October the 31st, 2025. The British host in the video came across as arrogant and condescending, with a sense of superiority so deeply ingrained in his mindset. In many ways, this is a true reflection of Britain's current mentality. This is the Britain of today. Its strength is a shadow of its former self, yet the instinct to stir up trouble worldwide has long been etched into its very DNA. When people think of Britain, the troublemaker label often comes to mind first. This once mighty empire on which the sun never set was never good at building. Its greatest skill was sowing seeds of discord everywhere it went. When it withdrew from its global colonial empire, it left behind a legacy of territorial disputes, ethnic tensions, and political chaos in nearly every former colony. Take China as an example. The root cause of the China-India border disputes lies in the so-called McMahon Line, a boundary arbitrarily drawn by the British decades ago. Before Hong Kong's return to China, Britain deliberately set up numerous political traps. During the 2019 unrest instigated by anti-China and Hong Kong rioting forces, it even openly stood with the rioters and egged them on. Is there ever a time when Britain's invisible hand wasn't behind China's troubles? The irony is that today's Britain is far from the empire that once dictated terms to the world. Its economy remains sluggish, its international influence has plummeted, and political infighting grows worse by the day. At home, prices are soaring and public finances are unbalanced, yet it still insists on lecturing China, a country thousands of miles away. To put it bluntly, This is nothing but an international farce of self-delusion. These days, the only real weapon Britain can still export is its media, from the BBC to The Guardian, Financial Times, and The Economist. These so-called authoritative media outlets, which hide behind the banner of press freedom, have made lying, distorting facts, and taking quotes out of context their daily routine when reporting on China. They enjoy huge benefits from the Chinese market, yet at the same time, they spare no effort to smear China and stoke hostility against it. This kind of double standard and hypocrisy has long become the hallmark of British-style morality. That's why some say watching Britain's steady decline in recent years is a form of historical justice. A country that has always thrived on creating trouble has finally lost the ability to do so, and for all of humanity, this might just be a blessing in itself. What do you think? Feel free to share your views in the comments section. If you find this episode valuable, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.